We're not going to be quiet anymore. We're going to talk about things to do with mental health. My son was diagnosed as being schizophrenic. He also got into some pretty heavy drugs. All of you guys here today are going to be a big part of what I call a paradigm shift, where we can get the public starting to be brave to speak out.
Welcome to State of Mind, a 26-episode series that looks at the many stressors in our everyday lives that affect our mental health. Everything from schizophrenia to alcoholism, road rage, and our addiction to technology. Today, we continue our discussion with the Bilo family. For the past 10 years, the Bilo's eldest son, Brian, has been battling a concurrent disorder, schizophrenia, and a drug addiction. This was the last thing his parents ever expected for their son, now in his early 30s. Like most parents, Gord and Virginia Bilo dreamt of seeing their firstborn get married and start his own family. In our last show, Gord and Virginia talked about getting through the hard times and how their faith played a role. Did you turn to faith? Was it more of a spiritual journey?
I prayed all the time. All the time. And what I found was, what I felt was I wasn't getting an answer, which was the usual question I mentioned before, was why? Why me? Why us? Why my son? I went through a couple of bouts of depression myself, just from not sleeping and not being able to cope and feeling hopeless. And eventually I think I just wore myself out so badly. I remember taking my dog I used to run, and I just said out loud, God, if you're there, I cannot do this alone anymore. I cannot do this by myself. I'm done. I'm depleted. It's over for me. And I remember running and feeling this sense of lightness in my body. All of a sudden, I felt like I was being lifted up. And that's when I started to really be able to cope. I realized that I wasn't alone, that there was something bigger than me out there.
When we come back, searching for Brian Bilo, from a local Sikh temple to the local streets.
Concurrent disorder? No.
A couple different disorders happening at the same time.
Couldn't tell you, but I'd like to know.
State of Mind. We're telling you the story of Brian Bilo, a young man diagnosed with schizophrenia. And like many people with mental illness, he also developed an addiction to drugs, better known as a concurrent disorder. We spent a day with Gord doing something he does on a regular basis, searching for his son. The search for Brian starts in their very own backyard. An empty soda bottle, cigarette butts, and a makeshift sleeping area are big clues that he spent the night here.
He would have slept here. And God forbid, I mean, here's a human being, a soul, who's highly at risk, who's very ill, and he's sleeping outside. He doesn't understand that he could freeze to death.
So why not come inside the home? Well, house rule is Brian has to be in treatment instead. A parent's instinct and concern for the safety of his son is what drives Gord to search for him. The past 10 years have included countless days like this.
I'll just have a look here, as maybe he's here.
First stop, a coffee shop where Gord went one day on his way to work, only to find Brian sitting in the corner since the early morning hours. Next stop, another unexpected place for Gord to look, a Sikh temple where Brian told his parents he found refuge and food.
To see this open-armed acceptance by the ladies in the temple accepting my son, who they don't know at all, it gives me hope that there are still, communities that will not judge my child, but they will accept him with open arms.
But driving around in circles looking for Brian here proves to be a bit too much.
Like how my kid even survives. I'm very upset right now just seeing this, because this is where my beautiful kid ends up.
Next stop, the local jail cell.
So I talked to the guard, and he was arrested last week. He's here now. Brought him here where he resides until he has a court date across the street.
Gord, what's it like looking back at that search for Brian?
Well, I have done it a few times. So that said, every time is difficult. It's extremely difficult, Helmy, from an emotional point of view. I mean, as you saw in that video, we did go to some parts of Surrey, for example, where I'm afraid just to be driving through them, where drug deals are going on in the street, and you can see the panic in people's eyes. Literally, you can see pain in people's eyes in some of these areas. And I'm so moved sometimes. I mean, I've done this on my own, where I'll just break out crying over the steering wheel, because my kid could be one of these people. And that's tough to take as a father.
Now, Virginia, have you ever gone with Gord on one of these searches?
No, I never was able to go. And somehow when these things would happen, I always felt it was important for somebody to be at home. I don't know why. I felt that way a lot. But it was very difficult to see him going, not knowing where, first of all, our son is, in what state he's going to find our son. Is he dead? Is he alive? Injured? And then I'm sending my husband out into these same areas to look for my son. It was probably as hard to stay at home just waiting.
Are you at home waiting and hoping that maybe he'll come home while Gord's out looking for him?
I'm just at home hoping he's alive, quite frankly. I'm hoping that he finds him and at least he's safe. There's not always a lot we can do about his illness, but as parents, it's nice to know when your child is safe, wherever that would be.
Now, you found him before, at a Sikh temple. We went to the Sikh temple in that video. What are some of the other places that you just didn't expect to find him that you found him before?
Well, I mean, as I said, I have found him in the forest. I have found him in the back of our yard, basically sleeping on grass with a pillow and covered with a garbage bag. I've found him in a local coffee shop. I've found him freezing cold at 5 in the morning by an Esso station. This is after he had walked out of a hospital. I found him in absolutely terrible places, but speaking to the Sikh temple, I mean, here's an example of a group of people who put their arms out to our son and basically to anybody to feed them and give them shelter. And if more of our community can do that and learn by that example, I think our community would be a better place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a decade of worrying and staying up and wondering where he is. Is that most of the time, or has he lived in one place for more than a few weeks at a time?
Rarely. There's been a few times over the years where he may have been in a place for 3, 4, 5 months. Those were the times where, to be honest, at this point, we would take a vacation. For almost a decade, we couldn't take a vacation together because one of us had to be around. One of us had to be home. So we had difficulty with that, just drifting apart, because our whole focus was our ill son. And that becomes a problem in a lot of families.
Absolutely. We're going to continue talking to the both of you. And when we come back, Gord and Virginia will talk to us about their son's adult years. But first, you can find out more about this show online at stateofmindtv.com. State of mind. The Bilo family, their son's state of mind has completely changed from a normal teen to an adult suffering from mental illness and addiction. Thanks again for joining us, you guys. I want to talk about family members that are estranged from their families. It happens a lot in different kinds of circumstances, in different cultures and different religions. Did you two ever get to a point in the past decade with your son where you just completely gave up hope in him, in your religion?
Well, certainly for myself, probably around the time when he was 24 or so, and I was exhausted and had tried everything, where I basically walked away from organized religion, and I found a new way to pray. I mean, I was raised in a Catholic home, and I went to church and I prayed. You're raised to pray for answers, to pray for fixes and things like this. And when it's not happening, I mean, it can only take so much rejection, if you will. And so I could say that I did lose that faith, but I didn't lose faith. And
Did you ever want to just give up on all of this and just say, you know what, we can't help him anymore?
well, a lot of times for sure. I mean, I wanted to walk away, but it's very difficult for me to, you know, just give up and forget about it.
Well, you get some cultures and some faiths where kids, no matter how old they are, live with their families and their parents, and then you have other cultures and faiths where, you know, 18 is the prime year for them to go and kind of do their own thing, no matter what state they're in. Did you learn a lot from other cultures and the way families deal with situations like this?
Yes, we were aware of that, particularly in some of the mental health groups we became a part of. And certain cultures, the stigma was huge. And I think that was part of just, you know, out of sight, out of mind. Just let them go and do their thing. We never really, we gave up hope, and we had to distance ourselves sometimes. Like I call it having to put on your own oxygen mask and take a breath for a while. There were times when we just couldn't handle it anymore. But we never gave up totally. And but you do have to take a healthy step back, because if you are becoming ill through this, you're never going to be able to help your child. And sometimes you have to be a little bit more reserved. But it doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means that I realized early on that this was a marathon, not a sprint. And you have to take that time, slow down, and look after yourself and the rest of your family.
Yes, and in came your spiritual journey. Do you do a lot of meditating or anything these days to help relax?
I do a lot of yoga. I was away this spring and did my yoga 200-hour instructor's course. And there was a lot of meditation involved in that. And I am not as good since I've come home about doing it all the time, but whenever I do, it is just absolutely the best thing to be doing.
Fantastic. We're going to continue talking with you guys in a little bit here. To watch all of the State of Mind episodes, you can always log on to our website at stateofmindtv.com.
Smoking.
Pornography, I think.
I will say crystal meth.
Technology.
Alcohol and drugs.
Welcome back to State of Mind. We are talking to Gord and Virginia Bilo, who are sharing their story with us about their son's battle with mental illness and addiction. We were talking a lot about other events that are happening to raise awareness, whether it be for cancer or heart disease. We're seeing fundraisers in schools, in our communities, in churches and temples, but not for mental illness.
That's correct, and that's certainly something that we hope this show can change. I mean, when you look at the statistics, the real statistics on individuals affected by mental illness, it's 1 in 5. And do the math on that just with our Canadian population. Mental illness and or addiction is simply everywhere, on every street. It's not in some convenient location off to the side. And hopefully more and more people talking about mental illness, be it depression, bipolar illness, schizophrenia, that will cause other people to talk. And I think what we can do here is cause a paradigm shift whereby everybody wakes up to the fact that this is bigger than cancer, diabetes, and heart. Altogether, it's bigger. And the doctors that I've talked to over the last couple of months, they've all told me that this will be an epidemic in the years to come if things aren't changed in the healthcare system and if we're all not made more aware that much sooner.
We see a lot of fundraisers for heart disease, for example, especially in the South Asian community, and they'll have awareness events set up at temples, let's say. What about mental illness? How can our communities all get together and spread the word in not just one language, but in every language?
Well, I think the first step and the primary step is to talk about it. Don't be shy. I used the expression, speaking to somebody the other day, we need to get mental illness out of the closet. It's been in there long enough. It's time to end the silence. It's time to let you and your neighbor know, and my wife's friends, that it's okay to talk about it, because everybody has something to do with mental illness in their family. I can remember growing up where my mother, she grew up in an alcoholic family. So there was addiction issues. And she still to this day has difficulty talking about that time in her life. We need to change that up. And us together as a society, if we're going to be judged as a society, we should be judged based on how we treat our most vulnerable. And as soon as we start doing that, we'll start seeing changes in healthcare. We'll start seeing changes in the way we look at our ill neighbor. We'll start seeing changes as to we don't walk by that homeless person anymore. Maybe we stop and say hello because, whoa, that person has a mother and a father and a brother and a sister, just like me. Why am I walking by? Why don't I stop and just give them a moment of my time?
Now, Canada being one of the most multicultural countries in the world, you must have met other families from different cultures and faith bases dealing with this as well. Do you see a difference, or do you find that stigma is bigger in some areas than others?
I think that the stigma is huge everywhere, but I think that in some cultures it's even bigger. And you were talking about the South Asian community, and I think that from my experience in the groups we've been in, it's difficult to even get a parent in the door to even talk about it. Oftentimes it's a sibling of the ill child who will beg the parent to come to one of these meetings because they can see the pain in their parent, and they're in denial. They don't want to talk about it. It's huge. It's huge, and I can't imagine. It's just too big everywhere.
Now, from these different cultures and religions and different communities are the people that work in local hospitals and the justice system, and they're dealing with your son all the time. Does that worry you that there's more stigma in some areas and not others?
It causes me grave concern that basically our jails have become the places where we put our mentally ill. My son's crimes are things like shoplifting, or he's been given probation where he has to be at a certain place at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock. He doesn't have the insight to actually put this together to say, boy, I better run to the recovery house I'm in. And he's been arrested on the street, put in handcuffs, taken to Surrey pretrial, booked, put in jail.
What's a pretty hardened criminals too.
I mean, but he's not a hardened criminal. He's a mentally ill person. He's somebody with a brain disorder.
He was in there with one of the Bacon brothers, which is appalling to me. Just appalling. that my son is put in the same light as a murderer. It's
And his
wrong.
crimes are what?
His crimes are petty. His crimes are.
And his crimes are the result of his mental illness. It's not like he's intending to be a petty criminal. He's more of a nuisance because he can't seem to grasp what he's actually doing.
Yeah, in the court system, I mean, I've gone before judges. I never dreamt when we got married that we were signing up to something like this, but I've gone before judges and I pleaded with them. And I go, Your Honor, that young man standing there in the orange jumpsuit is my son. He was a B student. He went to Holy Cross. He was a rep level soccer player from the age of 7. He's not a bad guy. He needs to be put in the hospital. And the courts are not set up to do this. But if I speak to a judge or a sheriff or somebody like that candidly, they all tell me that this is epidemic proportions already, that we need to change. We're having to deal with way too many people who are mentally ill in the court system. And quite frankly, I've sat there for hours when my son is going to appear for a shoplifting crime of a chocolate bar and watch the souls coming in there, and there's a lot of mentally ill people, and then there's simply a file right now.
And watch Stephen Harper decide we need more jails. We need more jails. We need mental health facilities to treat these people. We don't need more jails.
The amazing thing to me from your guys' story is that these people, your son and others like him, come from great families, and you guys seem to do everything right. You put him in a private school and Catholic school, and everything seemed to be okay. So the message to people is this can happen to anybody and everybody.
This mental health issues are not choosy. Addiction is not choosy. I can say that the spiritual side of me, that, you know, one morning I woke up after being angry at God, and I said, you know, I need something to do here. I need something to do. And God finally gave me the push to do something, but do something big. And that's what the show's all about. And we'll cause a paradigm shift. And so finally I'm listening to God again.
Gordon, Virginia, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We know it takes a lot of courage and strength to share this story with us, and I'm sure it's a difficult one, but we're also sure everyone watching State of Mind is inspired by your strength and inspiration. Keep watching as we continue exploring effects of mental illness and addiction and a number of issues in our world today, everything from road rage to self-image. Resources on all of this can be found online at stateofmindtv.com.